welcome for Matt Gratias. None of it will be classified. Not a single secret will be shared today, otherwise I'd have no job, but I don't have a security clearance anymore for that exact reason. Thanks for having us today. Really appreciate being here. As you said, Matt Gratias, Pacific Regional Director for MD5. MD5 is the DoD's National Security Technology Accelerator. It is a new program. It's under the Office of Secretary of Defense, in the Undersecretary of Defense for Research and Engineering. Before I launch in, I want to say a couple things about my background. And I want to say thanks to the two Mikes and Christy and the cross-campus team for hosting us today. Really appreciate it. I am a Southern California native, born and raised. I was actually married at Lake Avenue Church here in Pasadena and currently live in San Gabriel Valley in Glendora. So it is always good to be back in Pasadena. So what we want to talk about today, and here's a little bit on my background. He mentioned a PhD from USC, served in both wars. Was in the Navy, was a Persian linguist, wrote on submarines before that. Lived in Central Asia as a humanitarian relief worker in the late 90s. So when 9/11 happened, I had just come back to the US, and I was like, oh my gosh, we're gonna go to war in Afghanistan. I've just been living on the Afghan border for 2 years. I'm going. It was a very interesting decision, changed my life in many, many ways, and was one of the greatest things I've ever got to do. Following getting out of the Iraq War, I worked for National Security Agency for a little while, then came to USC to do a PhD in international relations and politics. While I was there, I had the opportunity to work with General David Petraeus, the former director of the CIA, and then learned about this very unique program office and said I'm in it, based on a few of the things we're going to talk about right now. So, with no further ado. The reason I'm here today is because the Defense Department needs your help, simply put. Why do we need your help? Well, commercial technologies are changing the nature of war. This is an excerpt from the new National Defense Strategy that came out earlier this year in January. And to summarize, it's talking about a suite of technologies that are coming online right now in a way that's going to change the very nature of how we fight, and it's going to potentially erode the technological advantage that we've had since the Cold War. Now, interestingly enough, the Cold War, did we win it? Right? How did we win it? Spending. Okay, yeah, we outspent them. We certainly did outspend the Soviets, but how did we leverage that spending to win? Technology, right? Did we ever have enough tanks to beat the Soviets or the Warsaw Pact in Europe? Never, right? But we kind of forget that, especially my generation, right? We think, oh, we were always dominant, but we weren't, in fact. We never had enough soldiers, we never had enough tanks, we never had enough hardware to actually win. Instead, what we did is leverage technology. That's called an offset strategy. And the original offset strategy during the Cold War resulted in a technological dominance and an advantage that essentially set America on the path for some 50 to 70 years. That was a suite of technologies that we know real well. Stealth technology, GPS, precision munitions. All of those combined to create this advantage. However, as we're seeing right now, that advantage is no longer there to the extent that it was. And the new technologies that are coming, artificial intelligence, autonomy, robotics, directed energy, hypersonics, biotechnology, they're going to be emerging from the commercial sector as much from the defense industrial base itself. Okay, taking a little bit of a fun shot here at the former vice president. But the legacy of DoD innovation is deep, right? Really what we're doing is we're looking at how it actually prompted Silicon Valley to start in many different ways. Steve Blank has a talk called The Secret History of Silicon Valley that really outlines the ways in which the Defense Department was at the core of the efforts there. What's interesting here for those of us in Southern California, this is the original internet, right? ARPANET, everyone's familiar with the story of how DARPA, at that time ARPA, developed the internet. So we see the two nodes from USC and UCLA, but also all of the other university partners. And of course the original router there is on the right. What I want you to understand on this slide, of course, is the deep, deep legacy of DoD and the IST revolution. one of the greatest technologies that pairs up with the internet, obviously, is the smartphone. It's a great slide that comes from Mariana Mazzucato in her book on the entrepreneurial state. What we can see is how many of the technologies that went into the first generation iPad and iPhone actually originated within the Department of Defense. However, without the help of Apple, the cell phone may still look like the guy on the left, not the guy on the right. And so this trend toward commercialization of technologies that were funded by the Defense Department through research at labs and at universities, never would have scaled to 1 billion people without the commercial market, without entrepreneurs, product designers, and the likes of Steve Jobs. Where is this going? Well, the big picture is that we've got two different trends, commercialization and globalization. What we want to notice right here is the inflection point in the early 80s when the Defense Department no longer was the primary sponsor of research, development, testing, and evaluation. This is a structural shift in the innovation economy, where the commercial sector far outstrips not only the level of funding, but the innovation that's coming out of it. So what we're looking at now is that tomorrow's defense technology is most likely going to come out of the commercial sector and not the defense industrial base the way it did during the Cold War. To wit, we're going to have the diffusion of technology. That is night vision goggles, one of the core technologies that gave us a tremendous advantage during the first Gulf War. Now you can buy them on Amazon. Bottom right, this is actually from a propaganda video that ISIS put out. It shows them using Google Maps in planning an attack. At one point in time, not only, maybe even 10 years ago, 15 years ago, the only way you could get top-end satellite imagery was if you were a nation state and you had access to satellites. But now, because of the commercialization of space, everyone has access to it. Now, most of us use it, just to navigate and just go somewhere. But our rivals and our enemies can actually use it to plan attacks against us. And so what we're looking at is a changing and evolving threat environment. There are new and complex challenges, trying to cyber attacks, hackers, drones, insurgents. And these types of challenges cannot be addressed with an old acquisition system, where you can build a major weapons platform. It's got to be quicker, it's got to be leaner. And we're understanding that now in new and distinct ways. And so what does this mean? Well, we're looking at it, and if you're on the left, and you're an insurgent, and you decide, well, we really need some artificial intelligence or network analysis, you can go to the commercial market, you can get it in 3 weeks, and you can field it. You don't have a bureaucracy, you're a flat network. You can move rapidly. But if you're the Defense Department, our warfighter, they're gonna identify the need. Okay, they filtered up the chain of command. Great, now we're gonna put out a request for proposals. Okay, that's gonna be bid on. It's gonna have a certain period of time. And you're gonna go through the contracting process, subject to, the federal acquisition regulations, the Defense Federal Acquisition Regulations, the Defense Accounting Audit Service, all of these different rules and laws, which are good and are there to prevent corruption and other advantages. Okay, so I'm not knocking them in any way, but it puts us at a disadvantage. So 3 years later, we finally fielded the technology, but our opponents have been moving rapidly against us. So what do you do? Anyone seen this slide before? I'm sure, right? No? Okay. What would you say the core capability is that you're going to provide to a customer? What does a customer need? Right here. Right here. Transportation. A to B. Exactly. How quick do you get A to B in the top slide? Years. But did you get any interim capability along the way? No. So right here, the customer's ordered some transportation. Give me the A to B. And you go through the process, and you build the wheels, you get the car. Finally, they're happy at stage 4. However, you've had no interim capability the entire time. So this could be building an exquisite system. That car, most likely, well, not most likely, in this metaphor, it's absolutely certain, it's going to be the most robust capability on the slide.
Beat my Tesla Model 3.
No comment. However, what you really needed was capability all along. So the skateboard gets you from A to B. Is it as fast as a car? No, but it gets you there. And then you start iterating. You start iterating again. And eventually you get to the car. But the point here is that along the way, you've had an opportunity to develop an interim capability. So how do you apply this to defense? Well, that's us. That's MD5. So again, MD5, stands for Military District 5, which is a name that is probably apocryphal, but you're not going to hear it from me. Where when DC, the grid for DC was set out, Pierre L'Enfant set aside one area and called it Military District 5. That's the current home in the National Defense University, where the National Security Technology Accelerator, us, we spun out of. And our mission, simply put, is to create new communities of innovators to solve national security problems. And so that, what that means is we are here today asking for your help in many different ways, but also saying, hey, can we join your community? And that's what's so fun about being in a coffee meetup, because this is a community, one of the longest standing communities of innovators and entrepreneurs in Southern California. How we do this, I'll outline some of our programs here in a moment, but it's to increase the intellectual diversity of what we call solution providers. Now, this isn't saying the folks who work for the DoD aren't great solution providers. They are. So I have some of the smartest scientists in the country working for the DoD labs. What it does mean, though, is that if you look at the overall federal enterprise, you got about 1.3 million people, servicemen and women under arms. About 800,000 civilians, take a few more, so added up, rounded up, what are we looking at? Maybe 2.5 million total folks working on defense issues directly for the government, out of a population of 320 million. So it's always going to be a small sliver. And that sliver is no longer enough. And so we have to look for ways of creating linkages between the commercial market and the defense market in order to be able to increase DoD's problem-solving capability. And we do that by partnering with ventures and in ecosystems and with universities. And we're talking about strategic uncertainty. How many founders are in the room? Did you know exactly what you were doing when you started your company? So how did you cope with the uncertainty? Pivot.
Yeah, in response to customer needs.
Exactly. And that's all we're trying to do is promote that mindset within the DoD, right? Rather than saying we know exactly what's going to happen in the future, because we don't. We don't know how our peer rivals are going to react. We don't know what's going to change in terms of the structure of the world economy. We simply don't. But what we do know is that there is a methodology and there's a mindset that enables us to move quicker and get to solutions faster. And we think we're doing that by creating networks of innovators. All right, hold on. Okay, so what we take is a regional approach. So on the left here, Region 9, that's me. So I get the great honor of being out here in LA. It's terribly tough duty. The weather is difficult. I spent a lot of time here in LA and another time in San Diego at terrible spots. The only worst spot is Hawaii, which you have to go to soon because of Indo-PACOM. So again, it's government service, yes. But more importantly, what you see is what we partnered with a whole network of top research universities in America, embedded deeply within their ecosystems, asking for help. And what we're creating is a defense innovation network, a national one. And the reason for this is that where are all the talent, the ideas? Where are they? Are they located in DC alone? No. So you got to get out of the Beltway bubble. You got to go where folks are. And that means, of course, when we say diversity of thought, but we also mean diversity of background. Right? So this is the Defense Department getting out and talking to folks. Different demographics, gender, everything, right? It is the total, overwhelming, positive impact of our country that we have to access. Okay, how do we do it? Well, we help the DoD solve problems by training service members and connecting them to problem solvers outside of the DoD through 3 portfolios of programs. Now, if we're talking about building communities, right, we can say, hey, great, let's go reach out to the venture community. But if folks in the military community don't know the language, don't know the lingo, don't understand how the venture community works, you're not going to have a good collaborative partnership, right? So first and foremost, we start with educating the Defense Department itself. So we bring top teaching teams to actual military units and commands all over the nation. So they can do that and develop innovation muscle, right? And connective tissue. Through collaboration is events where we'll hold, and I'll get into a little bit more on that in a moment, where we actually create opportunities for knowledge exchange between the communities that we're talking about. And Acceleration is our venture-facing portfolio where we're connecting with incubators, accelerators, startups, entrepreneurs themselves. So education, like I said, we have a couple different programs, boot camp to teach innovation methods and mindsets of the military, and we have a startup innovation fellowship. So if any of you have great startups and you'd like to host a military fellow, we have opportunities to do that. They'll come in. It's not free labor, right? These aren't interns. These are professionals who can come in and add it. But most importantly, they can learn on how you deal with that strategic uncertainty. Okay, collaboration. So I'm going to spend a little bit of time on these programs. Hacking for Defense. It is the coolest course I've ever taught. And we had a chance to teach it last year at USC. It was the first iteration of it, and I was on this great teaching team. And what we do, and so for all those folks who've taken courses at a university, how often are they cross-listed across multiple departments? Where you've got 4 different departments working: business, policy, computer science, engineering. Super rare, right? That's not how we teach. But this is how we do. We pull them all together, and then what we do is we go get real problems from the DoD. Actual problems from military commands. We bring them to the classroom, then we teach Lean Launchpad, Agile Engineering, and we just say, go. And the students create awesome MVPs. It is amazing, right? If you're asking for outside-the-box thinking, you just say go. You don't tell them what to do. So now you've got these students who have no military experience whatsoever, talking to colonels and majors. They have no idea what they're doing, and that's the best part. And so we guide them along the way. And a real quick example here at USC, we had a team called Magic Wire. And they were working on a problem from the Air Force's Office of Energy Assurance. And what was interesting is the problem the Office of Energy Assurance had was major military installations have to submit their electricity data and usage data to the service providers, right? Edison and the major companies. That linkage, though, creates an opportunity for a hacker to get in and actually subvert the command. So Magic Wire was working on this problem on how to protect cyber physical security for electrical plants and solar plants. And they did such a great job. And again, zero background, 5 of them. Over the course of 15 weeks, they got invited to the Pentagon, and they actually briefed the Air Force Chief Technology Officer on their minimum viable product. It is an amazing course. Hackathons. Who's been to a hackathon? Absolutely. So we host them. What's different about our hackathons? It's actual DoD problems. So we come in and say, hey guys, we want your help on solving a challenge area. Go. And then we staff it with mentors and advisors and actual military folks, and we bring in the whole community. It's a full stack, right? We want your help on these types of events to participate. We will likely be holding one in the fall here in LA, focused on space and aerospace. Source is an interesting one too, because what we want to look at here is that many folks in the military are actually quite bright, right? I was enlisted for 6 years, so low on the totem pole. And what I noticed was all my fellow colleagues are actually brilliant folks. Most of them. I mean, you had a couple knuckle draggers too, okay, so let's be honest there. But but what we understand here is that one of the core of innovation, idea of innovation, is unlocking the human potential. And so what we do with individual commands is say, hey, let's present opportunities for the lower ranking folks to come up with an idea and pitch it up their command. And so we create online tools, create online networks for them to be able to do what we call deck plate innovation. Okay, Acceleration. This is our externally facing portfolio program here, where we're able to interact with ventures, incubators, accelerators, and everyone. And here, what's different is how, if you are a startup and you want to do business with the DoD, how do you go about doing it right now? Has anyone done business with the DoD?
Not DoD, but NASA. And in order to help with the video on demand, you had to go through a whole process of filling out all kinds of information, and we dropped out.
Yeah, it's really fun.
Yeah.
There's a great slide. If you go to DoD's, and hopefully I don't get fired for saying this, but if you go to DoD's website for the official guide to marketing, it has about 11 different steps that you need to do business with the DoD. Step 8 has something to the effect of a statement like this. You may spend thousands of hours and hundreds of thousands of dollars creating a proposal that doesn't win. Good luck. Keep trying. So, I mean, that's a death knell for a startup. You simply don't have the time to do that type of activity. So what we try to do is create an opportunity for you to do defense market discovery early and often, right? So how would you know if the technology and the capability you're developing, if your product actually fits a military customer, if you don't talk to a military customer, if you don't know how they would use it in the field? So we create those opportunities. If you have a product, if you have a service that you think has defense applications, we can put you in touch with some folks so that you can begin the defense market discovery. We can't get you a contract, right? I can't give you money, but I can enable you to be able to facilitate that opportunity for you to figure out if you have product market fit in the defense market. So how can you help? Perfect. If you're ventures, tackle the DoD problem. We can help align you, and we can create those opportunities for you to understand what's out there. If you're an entrepreneur, you can share your skills. We need them. We need the methods and techniques that you use to solve hard problems and your gnarly problems. The government mentors. Share your experience. Come out, join our Hacking for Defense class at USC. Come in and mentor a team at one of our hackathons. And community, thanks for being here. Thanks for letting us be a part of it.
Excellent.
Excellent presentation. I really enjoyed hearing the integration between conventional entrepreneurship, actually. It's almost like an oxymoron when you think about it. But yeah, between traditional entrepreneurship and bridging the gap between that fast iteration, agility, and some of the slower, and don't mind me saying this, bureaucratic processes that military programs often consist of. Is this mic on?
Yeah.
You're never going to insult me if you call the DoD bureaucratic. Okay. Well, I mean, aside from the DoD, I think just government institutions are quite bureaucratic and unfortunately are slow to embrace innovation just because of all the hurdles that need to be handled. But it's a really interesting overview, and yes, there is a distinct need to develop innovations quickly and effectively because, as you pointed out early in the presentation, our enemies aren't necessarily following the same rules. So in any case, that was really awesome. We're going to open it up to questions and answers now. John is going to walk around with the mic. If you have a question, please raise your hand and we'll get it answered. We're going to save storytelling and comments for offline. Matt, will you be hanging out with us for a little bit? Absolutely. Yes, if you'd like to talk about your hoorah military experience, please save that for later. Thanks.
Hi, thank you. That was a nice presentation. I run a product development company here in Pasadena. We have people with ideas come to us all the time, and their challenge is that they don't necessarily have the resources, the funding, really, to make it happen. I recently was contacted by a firefighter who has a heartbreaking story about a failure that he had, and he has a really great idea. I noticed that you talk about civil servants as well on your webpage. Is there any kind of venue or way to present these ideas to the DoD to see if there's an interest?
There are a couple forms for it. What I would say is that that continues to be a persistent challenge because lots of folks have really great ideas and it can be somewhat overwhelming to hear them all the time. What I would say is that we're not alone. So what I mean by that is the Defense Department has another series of innovation agencies and organizations out there to help with funding. One of those is our sister organization, and that's called the Defense Innovation Unit Experimental, DIUX. Has anybody heard of them? Okay, and they're able to provide pilot contract funding if it's a capability that's of interest to the DoD. In terms of, and that's through called a commercial solutions opening. And of course, they have to have a DoD customer lined up first, but it's a rapid acquisition authority that they use to do that. In terms of civil opportunities, so firemen, police, that's a little bit outside our purview, to be honest. And so not able to address that specifically, but what I would say is that we do often get into something called humanitarian assistance and disaster relief. And so when we have events along those lines, I would absolutely welcome ideas from individuals like you mentioned.
Hey Matt, thanks for doing this presentation. I'm curious, often with the DoD, it's all about standardization, and adversaries don't have that problem. Could you speak a little bit about how your program facilitates rapid prototyping and delivery across a very large platform, or is that just a non-issue?
Oh, it's certainly an issue. I would say, the two elements of the defense market that are most problematic, one would be penetrating the black box, right? How do you even get access into the defense market? And the second would be the fragmented nature of the defense market. So how many services do we have? 4, right? Maybe 5 if you count the Coast Guard. So the Marines, the Navy, the Army, the Air Force. Each one of them has their own acquisition authority. Each one of them has their own needs. So you may have a great Marine customer, but your capability you provided to the Marines never makes it to the Army. So now we really do have the mandate because we're the Office of Secretary of Defense, right? And we serve all of the component services of helping bridging those gaps between the services and making sure that technology from one service can actually migrate to the others. This is happening at the senior secretary level as well. This is very understood, this problem, and I know the Secretary of the Army and the Secretary of the Air Force, I think they have it's been publicly noted, they have a lunch that they get together and talk about this or a breakfast, and talk about this very problem. So it's a major problem. Standardization. What we do see also is some unique units, and here's the smaller units, the more agile units, something like Special Operations Forces. They have their own entities and their own efforts. So something like SoftWorks, which is out there directly to do this, to kind of have a more agile and rapid acquisition for them in particular, and that can migrate to the other services. Great question.
Hi, I've worked on several DoD projects, including the F-35 fighter jet. So I've seen the cross-service rivalries and lack of cooperation. Looking at places like Northrop, Boeing, Lockheed, do they see you as a threat to their establishment? Because they're making a lot of money taking time.
Yeah, I doubt they see us as a threat, to be quite honest, because they're huge companies and they could kill us. Right? I mean, and with no disrespect to them, because they're incredibly important for national defense. We would not have. I mean, obviously, the great thing to look at, I want to answer your question, a big, long question, because you teed me up here. But, does the U.S. government make anything? No, right? So we're not the Soviets. So we have to buy everything in terms of defense, right? And then the people we buy them from, the Seven Sisters, the major prime system integrators, they know the defense market well. They shape the defense market. They have tremendous penetration, right? And so what that means is that they can do tremendous good, and historically they have, in promoting the defense and national security of America. Absolutely. And they make some money in the process. But there's also some challenges there, right? And so I think in one way they might see us as a threat if we were actually anywhere near their size. But I also think what they understand as well as anyone is that if we lose the next big war, they're in trouble too, right? And we're all on the same team in this regard. And so I think within that, and the other thing is there's tremendous outreach. I mean, Lockheed Martin has its own venture arm. They're constantly looking for new opportunities, acquisitions, takeovers, what have you. And so it's a question of how do you get that technology to the warfighter, and I think it takes all of us, but it also takes a mindset to be able to recognize, to kind of get out of the way and let the larger innovation ecosystems in America play a role as well.
It's kind of a two-parter. One is I was wondering in terms of cyber and hacking and all of the things we're seeing, especially from Russia, but also from some others, and recent reports about how they've hacked into a lot of our different power grids, things like that. If that's something you're thinking about at all as part of this project, to take advantage of anything out in the entrepreneur side. And then the other is blockchain. I guess they recently had a meeting where they're talking about standards and algorithms, and Russia sent their FSB people, and they want to control the algorithms. And I guess we had people from Microsoft and some other places go who were thinking of it with business applications. So just sort of curious, like how that sort of plays into the connections that you're making between the entrepreneur business side and defense side.
Yeah, let me unpack that because there's a couple of points
Yeah.
here. One, in regards to particular technologies, absolutely. But our focus is human-centric than on a particular technology vertical. That said, what we do argue for is what we call technology domain awareness, to make sure that folks in the DoD are aware of the newest, greatest, most cutting-edge technologies coming out, and whether that's blockchain or AI or what have you. Absolutely. So we're making to look those linkages so folks like yourself can tell leadership about it more often. Second would be, the security dimensions, meaning, spies are out there, obviously, and so in many ways, there's always going to be an effort to collect against American innovations. It can be done in very sophisticated ways now. You can't even be buying a company, right? I mean, you can simply just come in and a foreign entity can purchase a top-end company here as well. So tremendous challenges in that regard as well.
Hi. Thank you so much for being here.
My pleasure.
You mentioned that this is not a funding source and DIUX is, but the way you described it sounded more like it's purchase order fulfillment funding, essentially. Is there any program within the DoD that is traditional venture, that just finds a company that is doing something interesting and makes an investment for equity or not for equity?
Not that I'm aware of. And there are reasons for that, primarily in many ways political, right? That we don't necessarily want taxpayers' dollars being invested by someone. Now, the closest that you have to that in the US government it would probably be Intel, which is the CIA's venture arm. Lots of public knowledge about it, so, and they are able to make investments directly into companies. We are not. That said, though, let me just take a real quick chance here. There are lots of sources for non-dilutive capital within the government, from grants and other kind of contract opportunities. And of course, the most traditional way is through a small business innovation research grant. The process is, lengthy and burdensome, but it is a way, and many of the technologies that come into the Defense Department originate with SBIRs.
Hi. The people who are innovating this technology, they're not probably traditionally screened or cleared. How does that technology then move to a more secured development structure to take it forward?
Okay, couple different ways. One is that the company itself can go along a path to become cleared. Obviously, that's somewhat onerous and will create some costs along the way. Second is if the technology transitions into one of the primes, which has an inherent ability to operate in the classified level. And the third is that it never does, right? Not everything that can help national security needs to be classified, and in many ways it doesn't.
Hi, thank you for the talk. I was wondering if, this was sort of asked by her earlier, but I was just wondering if there's some risk in sort of having hackathons where you're sort of identifying the weaknesses, that potential enemies could exploit.
In what way specifically?
Well, okay, so like the example of the electrical grid, where you have that hackathon, in the time that it takes to sort of find and deploy a solution, isn't that a vulnerability that we've sort of identified to our adversaries?
In some cases, I think you're right. In most cases, the adversaries already know it, which is why we're aware of their knowledge of it and are trying to remedy it. I would never say that what we'd want to put out as some kind of zero-day flaw that no one is aware of, and then we popularize it and hope we can be fast enough before someone else. But quite frankly, especially within cybersecurity, the current state of affairs is such that our vulnerability is well known, has been briefed for nearly 3 decades now, and there are structural and political reasons why it hasn't been acted on. And so, just as kind of a non sequitur here, what industry was the first to really accept the need for cybersecurity? Banking.
Yeah.
Exactly, right? Because it was in their interest to not lose their money. Utilities, maybe a little less so, so it's harder to bring them on board. And once again, it goes back to actual structure of our entire economic and political system, where we have to induce companies to be able to see that security need.
You talked on something that's dear to my heart, because I was a program manager of one of the first projects came out of a national lab that used commercial technology in space. That was the Brilliant Pebbles project out of Livermore Labs. But now on the venture side, you mentioned SBIR. Typically, from the venture side, we tend to avoid companies that got SBIR funding because to the startup, it's great because you get some money early on. It's non-dilutive, but it tends to push you toward an application that may meet the DoD's needs, but from a venture standpoint, it's not going to be technology that we can then ramp into large commercial applications. So as you advise and work with startups, you discuss the various options. How do you want to grow your company? Do you want to be a DoD supplier? Do you want to be a commercial supplier? How do you kind of bridge that issue, especially with the SBIR folks who are somewhat blind to that?
That is a great question. The theory of our case is that we promote dual-use technologies, right? And so what we mean by that is I would never personally or in any professional capacity advise a company to be a pure defense play. It's simply difficult. The timelines are long for funding. It's based on politics in many ways, and the life of your country. Excuse me, the life of your company. Oh, that's a good slip, right? It's one of those things. So, how do you get around it? Well, what we would say is that if you're developing commercial technology that has defense applications, right, look at it as an adjacent market and scale and move into that market when it's right for your company to do so. And because otherwise, the valley of death, you may not make it if you're a pure defense play. That being said, in some cases, a company would have to make such changes to their product that it would be cost prohibitive for them to enter the defense market. And it's just not viable. And so we understand that, we recognize that, we're trying to make sure that our investor friends know that we're aware of that, and that insight is getting promulgated up to the leadership of the department. Now, that said, we'd also like to maybe lean on you a little bit and say, it is the life of the country. So maybe take a couple risks in that way as well. But what we're looking for is savvier defense entrepreneurs, right? So that in providing them the information so that they can make that decision what's right for their company.
One last question. I've heard a lot of complaints and gripes from PhD students, postdocs, and you probably might have some first-hand experience on this. A lot of them are given a full scholarship, and a lot of these are non-US citizens. And basically, once they get their degree, I think, have about 18 months to either find a sponsor, H-1B visa, UP-1 visa, whatever, or else they have to leave the country. Can MD5 be helpful to those types of individuals to possibly prevent the brain drain from these top universities and keep some of these people here in the U.S.?
You can tell from my reaction that is really a big issue. Unfortunately, it's outside the scope of MD5 to really deal with immigration policy. That said, I'll tell you my personal viewpoint. I think it's ridiculous that we will spend our effort as a nation of immigrants, right? And we will lose the top minds because we can't figure out how to keep them, and we can't get the policy right. Now, again, that's just my personal viewpoint on it, but no, we do not have an immigration component of this, though it's something we're very aware of and something we confront often. But hopefully, folks in leadership will one day figure out this problem.
Excellent. Thanks so much for the questions, guys.